Hi, I'm Michael Apple for BizNews.com. It's a great pleasure to speak to Jacques Broodryk. He's AfriForum's campaigns manager. Jacques, thanks for your time.
Good day, Michael. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good to speak to you.
AfriForum has gotten involved in a number of security-type initiatives in recent years, securing borders. I watched the documentary you did on that. You're working to battle cable theft, sort of neighbourhood watch initiatives. Tell me about these projects or initiatives, and are they bearing fruit?
Sure. So let me start by painting some background to the bigger picture. AfriForum has 155 neighbourhood and farm watch structures across the country, and these civilian safety structures comprise roughly 10,000 trained volunteers. And these are people who get involved in securing their own communities. They go out and they do patrols, they do take preemptive steps to prevent crime, and then also react to crime scenes when it's necessary. So that's the background to what we're involved with. Now, how that developed into what the launching of what we recently did, the Border Watch initiative, was our Messina Border Watch, our neighborhood watch. You know, Messina's on the northern border with Zimbabwe. And our guys there, our patrollers, have been involved with fighting cross-border crime for a number of years now, and they've become very effective at it. They've developed their own intelligence networks and gained a lot of experience in this regard. Where it got to a point where their successes couldn't be ignored anymore, and they also started developing a very good working relationship with the local law enforcement as well as with the military personnel that are deployed to patrol those borders. And together they had many successes, and this led to us producing a documentary about the challenges that they face and the efforts that they go to. Documentary was called Open Borders, and then we had such an immensely huge positive feedback from the public regarding our efforts that we realized that the Border Watch issue was something that needed to be addressed on a much broader scale. So we launched this initiative with the aim of strengthening and garnering even more resources for our neighborhood watches, specifically in border areas, because they're facing unique challenges compared to, say, neighborhood watches in suburban areas.
And I mean, you guys are not some vigilante group. You're actively working with, as that first documentary showed, you're working with the South African National Defence Force. And more recently, I saw on social media, you guys are working with the Tshwane Metro Police Department.
That's correct. We're definitely not vigilante groups. Our guys are very professional. Like I mentioned earlier on, they are all trained. Many of them are well trained tactically as well, especially the guys who respond to these scenes. They operate within the confines of the law, and they also obviously have legal support from AfriForum's side should they ever be unsure about anything. So no, it's a well structured civilian safety structures operating within the confines of the law. And we often assist law enforcement on local levels whenever they need our help. I think you just referred to a recent incident where we assisted the Tshwane Metro with when they had violent unrest in the western parts of the city. And we once again had one of those cases where disgruntled residents from a local informal settlement started moving into suburban areas and trashing people's private property and setting things on fire and damaging historical buildings. And how we often assist law enforcement in this regard is we have a number of trained drone pilots, and we also have drones, unmanned aerial vehicles. So we would then deploy to a scene like that, and we would deploy a drone, and by the use of that drone, we can then give law enforcement on the ground, the public border policing service, and so forth, direct live video feed of what's happening, where the protesters are congregating, which side of directions they're moving to, because obviously something like a drone is a lot less intrusive than, say, a police helicopter. And we also know that the police's air wing is under-resourced, like most of the rest of the department. So we would then deploy a drone or more than one drone in that area and support those local commanders with direct knowledge of what's happening on the scene. And then usually with that, we also deploy one of a small team of our own special security operators to basically just protect the drone operator and our equipment.
That's a bit of a game changer. Jacques, both you and I have been at a number of protests over the years. It's a cat and mouse game. Without that unique bird's eye view of what's going on, police will push protesters away, they congregate somewhere else. And you only have direct line of sight as far as you can see, and that makes it very difficult for officers on the ground. This must be a game changer for law enforcement to have that drone capability.
It definitely is a game changer. well, like I said, like we saw, I think last week, when I'm almost reluctant to call him this, but our acting Minister of Police, Becky Clearly, also saying that the police are now going to buy a bunch of drones, and that clearly shows how effective this has been. As you know, yeah, you touched on that, but you and I have both covered many protests in our years. Me as a former journalist, you still as a working journalist. And the line of sight is a very big problem, especially in informal settlements where nothing is structured or planned properly. So the drones definitely give that advantage, because we also know that protesters in South Africa, as ironic as this might sound, are very experienced protesters. And they also understand police tactics. They know how to create distractions. Send a few guys somewhere to start a small fire, police would respond to that area, and then the main group would actually come around another way. So the drone kind of cancels out all of those challenges, and really makes the police's efforts much more effective.
I see you wrote on Twitter, you were speaking about your working relationship with the TMPD, and you said there, quote, "pity politicians get involved." Does politics spoil that working relationship with law enforcement that seems to be pretty good?
Unfortunately, there's a very big element of negative interference from people politicizing the issue. So I'll give you one example of the Border Watch initiative that we launched now. Our guys really have a very good working relationship with soldiers and police force and other law enforcement agencies on the ground. They appreciate the efforts that our patrollers put in. They appreciate the resources that we're putting towards us. They really do. And often, in many cases, we have access to properties, say private properties, where a lot of smuggling is taking place, where the military does not have access to because it's private property. They have no mandate there. And unfortunately, through years of corruption and mismanagement and political interference, the relationship between the community and law enforcement has deteriorated seriously. So AfriForum could play a very big role in filling that gap, reintroducing the local law enforcement to the community and taking them onto the farms and areas where the problems were. And that led to one of the big successes. But unfortunately, when we announce these successes and it gets covered by the media, etc., then we've seen multiple times, recently again after the launch of Open Borders, that some instruction would come from high levels up to the ground forces and tell them that they are not allowed to cooperate with AfriForum's safety structures at all anymore. And that's very, very disappointing, and it just shows that our government sincerely does not have South Africans' best interests at heart. This is a political power play. And then obviously it brings up the question, why would they want to not secure the borders? Are there people who are perhaps involved with illegal activities or making money from it? I'm not saying that's the case, but that's obviously the questions that come to mind. And it certainly doesn't do them any good when it comes to building public trust in government.
Yeah, your relationship with the SANDF, with the TMPD and other law enforcement, is it purely on an ad hoc basis, or is there some public-private partnership that you've entered into?
No, it's purely on an ad hoc basis at this stage. It's we get involved when they need us and vice versa. When we have information and we're planning operations where we know that they could also be of use or be successful, it could be a great joint success, then we will obviously get them involved. So there's nothing official at this stage. It's just civilians playing their roles as volunteers and supporting law enforcement as best as they can.
Are there quarters of society who don't publicly want your help, but then approach AfriForum, when the cameras are off, or when they want to privately ask you for your assistance?
Unfortunately, yes, Michael, that does happen quite a lot. Various instances, not just security-related matters, but also legal matters, disputes, etc. Unfortunately, because of dishonest reporting and politicians often politicizing AfriForum's actions, that has unfortunately happened. There are a lot of cases where we get involved where we don't release press statements, so we don't say anything about it. Often because we just want to help, and other times because people are sensitive about it. They rely on AfriForum, they trust AfriForum to deal with their case, but they don't necessarily want to make it public, especially if there could be political repercussions in that regard. Yeah.
I think back to work I've covered where AfriForum was involved, where the media was not vaguely interested in what AfriForum was doing. It was in Walmansdal. There was a land claim that had gone wrong. Cornelius Janse van Rensburg, it was many years ago. I'm thinking 2012, 2013, so over a decade ago. AfriForum was involved there in helping the community get their land back. And there was a land claim that had gone wrong, and there were guys that were basically coming in and selling off restituted land. And that was not a white community that was involved there. Jacques, that goes against the script of what people perceive AfriForum to be.
It definitely does go against the mainstream media narrative, Michael. And not to shave you under the same comb, but the media in South Africa does seem to have a certain narrative that they often follow. To give you an example, AfriForum has an entire department dedicated to intercultural working relationships. So we've signed working relationships that come down to agricultural working relationships, safety and security, cultural protection and heritage conservation agreements with multiple other cultural groups in South Africa, which obviously aren't white groups. And we send out media releases on those topics every time we sign an agreement like that to the exact same journalists that we would send something out to when we're fighting hate speech against Julius Malema. But for some reason, those incidents simply just won't get the airtime that more provocative things like AfriForum defending hate speech or whatever gets. So it's interesting.
I'm sure by now you've seen the country went mad about Ian Cameron standing up to the police minister. Are you claiming him as one of your own? A lot of people may know or may not know he was head of community safety at AfriForum. Any comment on what went down there, Jacques and Gugulethu?
Mr. Cameron has not been with AfriForum for a number of years, but I do know him personally, and I wouldn't have expected anything less of him than to stand his ground the way he did. I think it was inspiring, and we can all learn from it, and it just shows exactly how immature and unfit our Minister of Police is for his position. Carrying on the way he did, shouting at a community member who represented members in that community, actual victims of gender-based violence, etc., to treat him the way he did was just absolutely unprofessional, unacceptable, and it was childish.
I see over the weekend, veteran journalist Max de Pree wrote an article saying he now sees AfriForum and Solidarity in a new light, quote unquote. You guys have had a fractured relationship over the years. For somebody who's never heard of AfriForum, has no idea what we're speaking about here, how would you describe the purpose for your existence and how that fits into contemporary South Africa?
Well, AfriForum is a civil rights organization, but we have a proudly Afrikaans character, and we are proudly Afrikaner organization, but that doesn't mean that we want to discriminate against anybody. We help wherever we can to build out people's civil rights in this country and to try and prevent government from trampling on those rights. And unfortunately, with the ANC government over the last 27 years, we've seen that has become a major issue in various instances, not just the mismanagement of, say, law enforcement and health services, wrongful arrests, people getting sentenced for the wrong reasons, absolute abuses of power and corruption. It's also gotten to a stage where basic services aren't being delivered anymore. Potholes aren't being repaired. Streetlights aren't being fixed. Neighborhoods aren't secure. So AfriForum has started playing a very large role in not providing those services, but taking control of those services ourselves. So our members and our volunteers countrywide started getting involved and started doing these things ourselves. And hence, that's where we got the neighborhood watches. That's why we've got AfriForum that has already spent tons and tons and tons on repairing of tar, on repairing potholes. That's why we see the guys getting involved when there are blackouts. So we are a civil rights organization, but we get physically involved in trying to state-proof communities against this nationwide collapsing country that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, well, that was Max de Pree's point. When government crumbles, he said that he wouldn't think that there would be a need for an organization like AfriForum in 2022. But he relented, saying, building robust, self-sustainable organizations or communities, because government simply has failed its mandate and can't provide those services. Is that where AfriForum fits in?
Yes, that's definitely one of the roles that we play. But like I said, once again, we don't aim to provide those services to anyone. We take charge where we see that it simply isn't happening, and we know that those complaints are going to fall on deaf ears. So either you can sit around and mope about something, or you can do something about it. And at AfriForum, we choose the latter option.
Jacques Broodryk, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Malcolm.